Hello everyone, Illumineer Greg here. Welcome back to the Tavern. So far we spent 2 full videos going over the design history of Ryan Miller, Lorcana's co-designer and brand manager. I think we finally managed to cover all the important notes of Miller's history in game development, but believe it or not, there's still more that I implore you to look into. Some games that I haven't talked about in any capacity yet are Tokyo Ghoul, the card game, Universal Fighting System, and various board game projects, all from the mind of Ryan Miller. Now that our 2-part series on Miller is over, I think it's about time that we dedicate a full video on the lead designer of Lorcana, Steve Warner. In our first retrospective video, I briefly mentioned Warner's history as a Magic the Gathering designer. However, Warner's work on Magic is just the tip of the iceberg for all the other cool projects he's worked on. This includes work on Duel Masters, its spiritual successor Kaijudo, and even the Plants vs. Zombies franchise? Since taking on these big designer retrospective projects, I've quickly found out that researching the design and development of a trading card game from the outside looking in is actually quite difficult, as a lot of the processes that help make them are kept behind closed doors. Thankfully, Warner has made some Twitter appearances recently, and these tweets give us quite a few glimmers of insight into his overall design process, and also some great history of Warner's game design talents. Combining the info in these tweets with the information that is available to us on the internet gives us a lot to talk about when it comes to the work history of Steve Warner. So let's get right into it. But before we get this video rolling, please leave this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps us out a lot. To begin, Miller talked about Warner's game design talent somewhat recently at the Nuremberg Toy Fair. This video is provided by Artem of Lorcana. Take a listen.
Okay, so I heard that I won the poll as who's the better game designer, but you guys made the wrong call. Steve's better than me. I think I'm really good at like the goofy stuff. Like, I mean, he's good at that stuff too, but he's really good. He's a great designer, but he's also great at developing as well. And I'm not as good at developing, so I think that's why he's a better designer than me. He's got more skills than I do. I'm good at designing, but he's good at designing and developing, and so I think that makes him... He's the guy I call the dream killer, because I would come to him when we were to Wizards of the Coast. I would come to him with an idea for a game, and he would just break it, like just break it in half, or even just an idea for a card. I'd be like, oh, I want to do this card, what do you think? And he'd be like... And now I can even hear his voice in my head sometimes when I have like an idea, and I can hear Steve's voice in my head going, don't do it, man, don't do it. So yeah, I think he's a better designer, and he's just a sweet guy. I love Steve.
It is always great to hear Miller talk more about the internal processes of designing card games, but the statement about Warner's skills in both designing and developing is really interesting to me. For those who don't know, designing is all about the original structure of the game, but a developer takes that design of a product and reworks it to make it as appealing and marketable as possible. For all my other film buffs out there, I like to think of it as the difference between a scenario writer and a director. The scenario writer presents the bare-bones story structure that a film will go through, but the director determines most of what you see on screen, and that will guide you through the story that the scenario writer has already established. Having this knowledge provides a lot more insight into Ryan Miller's quotes about Steve Warner being a surgeon, or a dream killer, or whatever other wacky name Miller chooses to use on that particular day, as these 2 words most likely refer to what Warner does in the development process of the game.
He will kill your dreams.
Of course, we know that Miller holds Warner in high regard, but I think there's also something to be said about letting his resume speak for itself. Let's start with a quick recap of what I've said in the past about Warner's history of designing/developing for Magic the Gathering. Warner helped with the development of Dissension, Shadowmoor, Zendikar, and Core Set 2012. Additionally, he has also had his hand in the 2013 Commander pre-constructed deck lineup featuring still popular commanders to this day, like Derevi, Imperial Tactician, and Prosh, Sky Raider of Kur. These are all great products and are all important pieces of Magic's 30+ year history, but the one that really sticks out in the hearts and minds of many players is Zendikar. No exaggeration. Zendikar is one of the most influential Magic sets of all time. It was a set centered around the backbone of the entire game, lands. This set finally gifted players the enemy fetches, standalone lands like Valakut the Molten Pinnacle, archetype-defining aggro cards like Goblin Guide, a dredged player's best friend Bloodghast, and so much more. I feel like one of the main reasons that this set has so much staying power is that it finally developed a clear mechanical reason for the land type in Magic. Before Zendikar, lands were still considered to be too variance-based, and an artifact of old game design. But with Zendikar in the picture, whilst the probability of drawing into your lands remains unchanged, providing an extra bit of power to each land drop with the landfall mechanic gives this card type a much needed push in the mechanics department. Alongside his work on all these products, Warner also had involvement in the Future League of testing and research and development. According to the Magic the Gathering wiki, the Magic the Gathering Future League is an internal playtest league in Magic R&D that attempts to test and predict what Magic the Gathering and the metagame will look like a year from now. The FFL primarily tests Standard. I think the Future League is one of the main reasons people often cite early 2000s to 2010s Wizards of the Coast as an example when it comes to great R&D in card games. They weren't just developing with the next set in mind, they had at least the next 3 in their minds when testing the upcoming sets. It is hard to know too much about the inside baseball of Magic R&D since a lot of it happens behind closed doors, but what this does cue us into is that Warner is definitely very well versed in game balance and testing as well. Of course, I hope that Lorcana will be implementing a similar type of philosophy when testing sets, as it is super important to think about the entire card pool of a game when creating new cards. Part 2, Kaijudo. Kaijudo is a great game to look at when speculating on Lorcana because both Ryan Miller and Steve Warner have had their hand in making this game come to life. As of recent, Steve Warner has made quite a number of Twitter appearances as well. To begin, friend of the channel Mark Wooden sent the following tweet on February 2nd, saying, "You designed Andromeda. What other cards did you have a hand in bringing to life in Kaijudo?" Warner replied and said, "It's hard to remember. I remember Changeobot, Glurgle, Herald of Infernus, Kruagar, Hive Queen, few other crazy ones I'm sure, more crazy ones in Duel Masters. I don't tend to remember many of the cards that I design. So much happens in development, best not to be attached." We'll dive into some of Warner's designs in a moment, but this tweet again highlights the distinction between design and development. It really is possible for cards to come out of the other end of development completely different from when they first entered. Some great insights about personal attachment also comes from this tweet. As I've highlighted previously, development is all about making the product as appealing and marketable as possible. So of course some changes need to be made from prior iterations of the cards. Because of this, the best thing a designer can do is not get too invested in any one particular design. Alright, let's look at these Kaijudo cards that Warner has recalled designing. If you want a rules refresher, we covered Duel Masters / Kaijudo in our first video on Ryan Miller. It is linked above in the cards. Of course, Mark mentioned Warner had designed Andromeda of the Citadel, which is probably one of the most broken cards in the entire game. Andromeda is a 9-cost, 11,500 power, light celestial dragon with 3 abilities. First is a double breaker, which means it breaks 2 shields when it attacks. The second ability, Fortress of Light, allows the player to gain 2 shields on placement of the card. This is an incredibly powerful effect, especially considering you only start a game with 5 shields. With a singular card, you recover 40% of your life, and if that wasn't already good enough, Andromeda's third ability, Awe Strike, makes the opponent tap, or exert, to use the Lorcana term, one of their creatures when it attacks. So not only do you get to recover 2 shields, but Andromeda also is a really great card at stalling the game to a halt with that powerful third effect. Next up is Changeobot, Glurgle. The main thing that sticks out to me about this card is the ability to search for a specific card that you name. Searching your deck for a particular card is typically referred to as a tutor in reference to the Magic card Demonic Tutor that allows you to do just that. What makes Changeobot a bit different from a tutor is that you indicate the card that you are looking for from the get-go. This is an interesting way to achieve the desired effect of allowing the player to grab any card, but also restricting it in such a way that the opponent gets to know what you are adding to your hand. A fairly simple but incredibly powerful design by Warner is Herald of Infernus. This card allows you to put a non-evolution dragon card from your hand into the battle zone whenever he wins a battle. At just 5 mana, this card is sure to be able to allow you to potentially cheat out several high-costed dragons for free. To make an easy Lorcana comparison, imagine being able to play Maleficent on turn 6. This card is very good. Our last 2 cards are green creatures. First up is Kruagar of the Hordes. This card has a really cool mana ability. When you place it into the mana zone, you reveal the top card of your deck. If it is a non-evolution creature, you get to put it in the battle zone for free. The other card here is the Hive Queen, which allows you to look at the top 3 cards of your deck for a level 5 or less creature, and then put it into the battle zone for free. Between these 2 green cards and Herald, it appears that Warner is a big fan of cards that allow you to cheat out other cards directly onto the field. We haven't seen this in Lorcana so far, but I think it is cool design space that can be opened up in the future. Believe it or not, we're not yet done with this single tweet. Upon mentioning that he made some designs for Duel Masters, I just had to comment and reply. I said, "Didn't know you worked on Duel Masters as well. If you don't mind answering, what years did you work on it?" He replied and said, "I actually worked on it before it came out too. I was in customer support then, but would get to playtest with R&D and help. It was more official in 2005 when I joined R&D. It was one of my primary roles while in R&D. I assume he's talking about designing cards here, which is his primary role. Aside from the knowledge of his involvement, unfortunately we don't have any direct examples of his Duel Masters designs, but just knowing of his early involvement is a big deal. Like I said in my reply to this tweet, Duel Masters influences everywhere. The security system in Digimon is very similar, and being able to commit a hand to resource is seen in games such as Dragon Ball Super and Zillions of Enemy X. And of course, from a card design perspective, there were undoubtedly many card designs from Duel Masters that probably helped inspire novice game designers into learning how to balance and design cards. Aside from a few exceptions, Bombazar, early Duel Masters metas were a pretty balanced and fun play experience. I want to promote this series here because I love it so much. If you're interested in learning more about the progression of metagames in English Duel Masters, please check out Garabon's The History of Duel Masters series. I've watched it all myself a few months back, and I recommend it to everyone who even has a slight interest in Duel Masters. Plants vs. Zombies. Alright, so the various trading card game projects Warner has worked on thus far make sense in the progression of his career. But did you also know that he worked on a digital Plants vs. Zombies card game? Yeah, I actually had no idea that this game existed before I started working on this video, but sure enough, this game actually exists. In what appears to be a response to Blizzard's incredibly popular Hearthstone released in 2013, Plants vs. Zombies Heroes from 2016 is a game with a linear 1 per turn mana curve, cards represented with attack and defense stats, and of course, different heroes to build and play with. What separates this game from something like Hearthstone is the column-based gameplay loop between you and your opponent. In true Plants vs. Zombies fashion, the placement of your plants is vital to pulling off your game plan and achieving victory. During his time at Popcap, Warner was able to design hundreds of cards and over 400 PvE stages for the game. Unfortunately, it is not exactly known which cards and stages are his work. However, with numbers like these, it is pretty easy to say that Plants vs. Zombies Heroes would not be the finished product it is today if it weren't for Warner's involvement. Plants vs. Zombies Heroes is still in the App Store as a free download, so if you're looking for something to play while we wait for these long months for Lorcana's release, this doesn't seem to be a bad option. This is more or less everything you need to know when it comes to the lead designer of Lorcana, Steve Warner. It is late March at the time of recording this, and springtime is well underway. So I really look forward to Lorcana's gameplay reveal sometime this season. Hopefully, you are filled with as much confidence as myself when looking into the work history of both Warner and Miller for Lorcana's gameplay. I truly believe that this will be an incredible trading card game with some great brains backing it. If you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe to help out the channel. We have so many plans for when the gameplay gets revealed. So for more on Disney Lorcana, please stick around at the Tavern. We'll see you then.